Today I stand high on the Abbey Crag, dominated by the Wallace Monument. Looking down there, on the plains below, is the mighty River Forth. Stirling Castle in the background. My objective today, to explore the year 1297 and the Battle of Stirling Bridge. It's important when you look at a battle like this that we try and get a good deal of information on at least the mindset of the commanders, because the decisions of those few in authority is what affects the outcome of the battle and the lives of the many. What do the English actually know about William Wallace? It's said that they knew he was tall, he was imposing, a bloody man. Wallace shot to fame, or infamy, when he murdered William de Hazelrig, the Sheriff of Lanark. Since that time, his insurrection grew and grew, as this upstart in the eyes of the English gathered men to him. On the other hand, we have Andrew de Murray, or Murray as he's more commonly known these days. Murray is the more experienced. He came from the knightly class. Murray would fight at the Battle of Dunbar in 1296 and be captured. He would be imprisoned in Chester Castle. He would escape. He would make it home, and he would spearhead the revolt in the north. Who was in charge of this army? It's debatable, because they did join forces. But with Murray being the more experienced, obviously Wallace had a great, if not equal, input. But you have to lean towards Murray's battle experience to at least have significant sway on the day that was about to unfold. I'm now below the Abbey Crags. The crags are 360 foot above this low-lying plain. After Wallace and Murray had watched the English deployment, it must have been confusing, because 3 times they crossed, recrossed, and had to come over again. But once there was a definitive deployment of the troops, Wallace and Murray had his men form up here, and slowly but surely, and with grim battle determination, they would make their advance towards Stirling Bridge, where the English van, or at least part of it, had crossed. That old causeway ran down this way. It's difficult to imagine with modern day development the Scots formations making their way down here. The starts of the English arrows raining upon them, and the Scots loosing their own arrows, as the men went from a slow trot into an advance. It would not be long before they levelled their spears and charged the English elite. I sometimes wonder what it was like when Wallace and Murray, riding next to them, keeping them focused, upbuilding them, keeping them in line together so they kept their head for that vital moment as they readied themselves for the inevitable fight that was about to come. This is the more modern Stirling Bridge. This is 15th century. The original bridge had stone foundations, but it was a wooden structure, and it stood between 50 and 70 yards upstream. And it spanned the River Forth at an angle. And it's said that the bridge was barely wide enough for a horse and cart. What do we know about the English commanders on this side of the Forth? The English army was headed by John de Warrene, the Earl of Surrey. He was 66 years old at the time. King Edward I was in Flanders on campaign at the time. John de Warrene was a companion of King Edward's. He'd served with him in Gascony. He was also by his side at the Battle of Lewes and the Battle of Evesham. More notably, John de Warrene was the commander responsible for defeating the Scots at the Battle of Dunbar. John de Warrene did not like being in Scotland. On the other hand, you have Hugh de Cressingham. Hugh de Cressingham was the king's treasurer, or as he was known to the Scots, the treacherer. The Scots hated him. He was an base, slippery character, known as a haughty, arrogant man, a voracious man, a man who was consumed by greed. Cressingham also served in the Welsh Wars under Edward I. Cressingham was a pain in the flesh for the Scots. Another notable knight who served on the English side was a man called Marmaduke de Twang. Now this knight is significant because it's his eyewitness account that was related to the chronicler Walter of Guisborough. The two of them lived a very short distance from each other, from Walter's priory to Kilton Castle, which belonged to de Twang. De Twang would have a very individual experience in this battle, and one which he would not forget. What's revealing is that the Earl of Lennox and James the Stewart they join the English camp. Now, it may be because they were summoned, that's very possible. But they decide or propose to go and speak to Wallace and Murray. You can imagine the kind of reception that they might have got. My mind tells me that Wallace and Murray would have been guarded against them. They would have regarded those as men with foot in both camps, men duplicitous in nature, who were seeing which way the wind blows. Anyway, they decided to take off, and they promised Warrene that they would return with 40 armed horse the next day. Now, how many English numbers were there? Guisborough exaggerates a great deal. What's probably more accurate is when Cressingham wrote to Edward, and he says that he had, up to that point, 300 horse and 10,000 foot soldiers. Warrene told his men, his troops, to be ready to cross the next day. Now, there was a knight in their company called Richard Lundy, a Scots knight again, who actually proposed a crossing way further down there at a ford where men could pass 60 at a time. And during this council of war, Cressingham rebuked him, saying that he would not waste the king's money. Very unlike him, he would not waste the king's money in vain manoeuvres. So sunrise the next day, the English army start to cross this narrow bridge. Guisborough expresses his amazement, knowing that they could only barely cross two abreast. But they cross, and then they're told to cross back again because Warrene has overslept. Warrene readies himself, gets his breakfast and what have you. That Wallace and Murray must have been watching this and wondering what the heck was going on. But they cross again, and then they're called back because the Earl of Lennox and John the Stewart arrive without the promised men. And then they cross again, a third time. Cressingham is fed up of this, so Cressingham with Marmaduke de Twang and part of the van of that English army start to make their way over the bridge and deploy on this side of the ground. Wallace and Murray would have been watching this, and once they had that definitive proof that the English were making their move, that's when Wallace would have started his advance from under the Abbey Crags, down each side of the causeway, and towards the English host here.
Tell your commander that we are not here to make peace, but to do battle, defend ourselves, and liberate our kingdom. Let them come on, and we shall prove this in their very beards.
It's so overgrown here that I'm having a spot of bother just getting out here. You can see I'm almost up to my neck in bramble and nettles, but this is just a little more upstream than where the bridge would have been, but not that much further. So behind me, the English have crossed the bridge here. The Scots are well on their way now down from beneath the Abbey Crag. They've come along both sides of the causeway. The English are deploying way to my right here. Now the River Forth forms a serpentine loop here, which ultimately envelopes the English army, and it would be their trap before the Scots levelled their spears and charged them before only so many were able to cross that bridge. That bridge would have been congested, and there would have been a panic by the time the Scots rank broke into the English forces.
Nowadays, battles of a different sort are fought here. But after we've wound our way through, thank you for joining me, but we've wound our way through the concrete that now surrounds most of everything. Beyond the rugby grounds there, you have that large loop of the Forth. So most of the English army would have come across the bridge, turned right, and deployed in these grounds here. Now the Scots army under Wallace and Murray would have come right down the causeway over there, and probably about 1,000 yards out they would start to level their spears. Their adrenaline would be pumping through their veins, encouraging each other, and then there would be no holding them back as they came here and they engaged with the English. Now, Warrene on the other side of the river, you can see the castle just over there. English were always also watching from the castle grounds, but Warrene could only watch while a congested Stirling Bridge could only take a few at a time, and the army were engaged here. Very quickly, the Scots penetrated and made a difference. The English horse could not deploy. The English infantry could not deploy properly either. So they were jammed in, they were hemmed in here by the large loop in the River Forth. Warrene watched as Cressingham himself was pulled down from his horse and slain. As the battle progressed, it wouldn't have taken long with Wallace, Murray and his men fighting furiously to drive them back. One report says that one armoured knight on horseback was able to swim to safety. They estimate that around 300 of the Welsh infantry were able to swim the Forth to the other side. Marmaduke de Twang, once he saw that the battle was rapidly drifting away from the English, still mounted, cut his way through the Scottish army with his retinue back towards the bridge in an effort to cross it. His young nephew, Squire, would be unhorsed and he would be wounded. He would cry out to his master to save me. The English would be chanting, flying their flag, trying to rally their men for God and St. George, but all in vain. These were the killing fields. So beyond me here is the great loop in the River Forth, and this would be the death trap for so many of those men there. It must have been sheer panic, and some say that when Warrene took flight, that he had the bridge destroyed behind him. But I have to ask, how long would that have taken? How many men would it have taken? And did they have the tools to do it? And with all that pressure on them, with a battle slipping away, carnage before his eyes, men panicking, swimming for their lives across the river, it sounds both impractical and unfeasible to me. I don't buy it. What I think, this is my opinion, for what that's worth, but what I think is that not so much with the pressure going over as part of the English vanguard crossed the bridge to meet the Scots, but the panicking going back. Horses trying to get over it, people trying to get over it amidst the horses, people climbing on the bridge, around it, trying to get over the other side from the outside of the bridge. The pressure must have been immense, and I think that the bridge cracked. It cracked under pressure, it gave way, and it completely collapsed, isolating the English on this side at the merciless Scots. Not at the mercy of the Scots, at the merciless Scots, for they would be killed. There is no two ways about that. And for Warrene to take flight. It's said that Cressingham, once they got his body, once the battle had ended, as the Scots picked their way through the battlefield, stripped and robbed English soldiers, that he was undressed, he was stripped naked, and he was flayed. Some say Wallace made a baldric for his sword, a strap for his sword. Whether that's true, or whether that's propaganda to go against Wallace, who knows? He was a bloody man. And we know that with battles in the past, it has been common to strip the dead and mutilate the dead in some instances. And it's highly possible that it happened here at Stirling Bridge. John de Warrene, the Earl of Surrey, when he was making flight, would hand over custody to Stirling Castle to the knight Marmaduke de Twang. Of course, that wouldn't last long. Somehow, with a the bridge collapsed or not, Wallace and his men found a way over, and he quickly capitulated and handed himself over. He would be a prisoner, I think it was for about a year, and lucky to have been shown mercy. Andrew Murray would suffer great wound in the battle, which would ultimately kill him. They reckon that Murray died around November. Wallace still wrote letters under his and Murray's name. But when Murray died, Wallace would quickly become guardian of Scotland. And on this victory, Scotland was, for that time being, on a high. What of Edward the First? Edward Plantagenet in Flanders. How did he react? Well, knowing Edward's character, his personality, he would have been furious at John de Warrene. He would have been furious at the loss of Cressingham, his tax collector, his administrator in Scotland, because that all came to an abrupt halt with losing this battle. Not to mention the men he lost, the horses he lost, and the stability he lost in his quest to take over Scotland. But he made very explicit orders that no further campaigns were to be mounted or undertaken until he was there to take command in person. That was the nature of Edward. The decisions of men in authority, I mean, it does amaze me when you have a 66-year-old veteran who was easily swayed by someone like Hugo de Cressingham. Because Richard Lundy's proposal to cross a ford further up, 60 at a time, would have forced the Scots to negotiate their entire movements. That could have swayed the outcome of the battle. Cressingham was obviously a very strong character. De Warrene, tired, possibly weak, capitulated to Cressingham. When Cressingham says we will not waste any more of the king's money in vain, his attitude was, we just need to attack these rebels and we'll win. Well, that didn't happen. But I can imagine, even though Warrene and Edward I go way back when they were very young, back to his princely days, that with Edward's temper, not to mention the loss all round of what happened, he would have been a furious but determined man, and we know where that went. That will be probably a 3-part video that I do in the future, when Edward's 1298 campaign, which ended at the Battle of Falkirk. But he would not have been a happy man on hearing news of this. This has been a very difficult film to make, simply because of modern day development, and to ask you, the viewer, to use your imagination and to be able to visualize beyond the roads, the traffic, the railway, the houses. It's a tall order, but visualization is something that I'm deeply involved in, and for me it's how you really bring the past to life, and you give history a heartbeat and a pulse, and that's important if it's going to mean something to us. It's important if we're going to remember it, and places like this deserve to be remembered. But in view of all modern day housing developments, what have you, I think it's very fitting if a battlefield or something as significant as this place is going to be used for something else or built over, that it's used as a rugby ground. And the sport of rugby, even more than football or anything else, I would like to think that the men of Stirling County Rugby Club and the visitors who come here to take them on somehow are energized by a spirit of the past, knowing that they are playing, that they are gritting their teeth, that they are fighting as a team to win on a place where people went before them for a very different reason. Thank you for joining me and walking in the footsteps with me. This has been the Battle of Stirling, 1297. If you have enjoyed this video, thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, be first in line to receive any future videos and projects that I do. Thank you for watching. The appreciation is from the heart.